I do not want to go into the detail of the book, except say a few things, and essentially indicate congratulations to the colleagues who did a great job. I did have a chance to review most of the papers, so I think what they are talking about in the book is methods for global assessment of land degradation, which is a very important topic, extent and severity of land degradation, opportunities for improvement, key drivers of land degradation, economic, social, and environmental costs, and land degradation and human health issues, possible policies and development strategies. And I think you are going to hear those from the subsequent speaker quite at large extents. I think the question which is relevance of this Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations 2.4 target, which states very specifically that by 2030, ensure sustainable food production systems and implement resilient agricultural practices that increase productivity and production, that help maintain ecosystems, that strengthen capacity for adaptation to climate change, extreme weather, drought, flooding, and other disasters, and that progressively improve land and soil quality. So I think your book is very relevant to target 2.4. The book is also relevant to target 15.3. That states by 2020, combat desertification, restore degraded land and soil, including land by desertification, drought, and floods, and strive to achieve a land degradation neutral world. So I think those two sustainable development goals and targets, your book is very directly related. COP21 going on right now. French government has adopted the project called 4 per Mille. One of my greatest honor and professional career was the minister, Mr. Lafol, came to see me before he documented this, and we discussed. I think he's much more ambitious than I would have been, but the fact that he's proposing to increase carbon in soils of the world at 0.4% per year to 40 centimeter depth, that comes to 2.8 gigaton of carbon per year. That's beyond my estimates, and I hope even if he succeeds to achieve half of that or one-third of that, I think that's a tremendous achievement, and your book certainly has a relevance to that. Cost of land degradation, already mentioned, $300 billion, which is really quite large. And to me, that was, and of course, the cost of no action. I won't go into that part in detail, but the breakdown: South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, China, global 3 billion people impacted. That information, this table, will be used quite a lot globally, and especially people like myself who need to understand what the cost of this is. Prem, I said your third book, and I want to go into that part. I hope you'll undertake it. What are the futuristic issues that are important? Land degradation and emission of greenhouse gases. Thresholds are critical levels of land degradation, peak soil or endangered soils, land degradation and human populations, water renewability and quality, including algal blooms, biodiversity. Some of these things I'm going to talk very briefly. The first one, emissions. Since the beginning of agriculture, I think that's when the Anthropocene began, although Paul Crutzen doesn't think that. Land use and soil cultivation has contributed till 2030 486 gigaton of carbon emissions. Breakdown from 1750 to 2010, prehistoric, 2010, the distribution here. Compare that with the fossil fuel combustion emission, which till 2010 are about 200 gigaton, and 2010 to 2030, 190. Therefore, the total is 390. 486 has a potential to reverse. That's what the book we edited, Joachim and myself, Recarbonization of the Biosphere. And that's what I hope COP21 recommendations will be implemented in terms of carbon sequestration. And this is also, of course, the cause of superglaciation. The other relations, erosion and emission of greenhouse gases. That's a very important topic, very important theme of land degradation. And according to my estimation, and I must say that not many people agree with that, we emit about 1 gigaton of carbon into the atmosphere by erosion caused by water alone. Of course, there is some sediments and carbon taken into the ocean, which is buried, but overall 1.1 go into the atmosphere. Several things happen. Extractive farming begins this process, depletion of soil organic carbon, loss of soil resilience, decline in ecosystem services and functions, loss of biodiversity, which eventually leads to hunger, malnutrition, and political unrest, civil strife, migrant crisis facing the Europe. I think this is a kind of crisis that a downward spiral that begins with land degradation right from the top. The other aspect which I hope needs to be addressed from my perspective as a soil scientist is defining the critical limits, the threshold limits. I would like you to consider soil as that ball over there and the critical value which determines the resilience of how it moves. And this ball has possible states in which it can go through, which is soil, for example, until it reaches a level that it can still come back. But if it goes beyond that critical threshold, then the soil or land will never be able to come back. It in fact changes its form, and that's the irreversible degradation. And we do not know those limits. At least I do not know those limits for most soils and more regime. We have heard about peak water, peak soil, peak phosphorus, many peak, but I think peak phosphorus is something which also follows the Hubert curve, and the concept of competing uses, the nature conservancy needs, urbanization, many other for which the soil, I think the peak soil concept really need to be addressed from the economic points of view. Endangered soils. You talk about endangered birds and animals, but endangered soil. There are soils which degrade irreversibly, that they are indeed endangered. And as an International Union of Soil Science officer, we really need to look at that. Antibiotics. Not many people know about it. 95 to 99% of the antibiotics that human and animals take, they come from soil. Penicillin. Many other bacteria that make up, and the danger is that as we contaminate our soil with manure based on animals that are also taking antibiotics, we really cause a very, very serious problems of land degradation related impact on resistance that may help. A couple of things which I did not see, and they are economists which need to be looked at. Malthus versus Serpent concept. Malthus, I don't need to repeat it, as you know what it is. Human population at risk of outgrowing carrying capacity of land. The size of the population is limited. But I would have liked to see something more positive. The Serpent concept that food production can and will increase to meet the needs of population. Threat of starvation and the challenge of feeding more mouths motivates people to improve their farming methods and invent new technology to produce more food. I like very much the book that came out of Machakos by Mary Tiffin, More People, Less Erosion. That's a very good concept. That yes, green growth. I would have liked to see some more on that. Hopefully in the third book, fostering economic growth and development while ensuring that natural assets continue to prove the resources and environmental services on which our well-being depends. The limits to growth, you know whom I'm talking about. If the present growth trend like population and resource depletion, etc., continue, the planet will be reached extreme within the next, sometime in the next 100 years. And it's possible to alter these growth trends and to establish a condition of ecological and economic stability that is sustainable for the future. And if the world's people decide to strive for the second outcome, that's again an important concept in moving forward, rather than the first, the sooner they begin working to attain it, the better will be the chances of success. I think that's a very important concept in terms of thinking where to go next. This comes from, you see that Barbier's very recent article, in fact, a few weeks old. He talked about step 1, step 2. You can read what they are, and then eventually to step 3. My disappointment is he never mentioned restoration of degraded lands, which is a very important step and missed out even by a very famous economist. The planetary boundary concept, depletion of stratospheric ozone, the biodiversity loss and extinction, the chemical pollution, the climate change, the ocean acidification, fresh water. There are 8 or 9 of those, atmospheric aerosol loading and land. This is from Johan Rockström from Sweden. Unfortunately, once again, he also missed land degradation to be included in that list, which is a very important part. So what I'm trying to say that even these things are so obvious, but yet they are ignored, and that's a very important omission, which I think we need to consider. I want to say something about how do you meet the food demand of the world with the issue of the land degradation. The world already produces enough food to feed 10 billion people. Thus, food and nutritional security, in my opinion, there was an article that came out yesterday or day before in Nature that does not definitely necessarily agree with what I'm going to say. Reduce waste, which is 30 to 50%. Increase access to food by addressing poverty, inequality, wars, refugees, and whatever the issue. Improve distribution. Increase use of plant-based diet, very important one. Accept personal responsibility of not taking things for granted, such as land. And increase agronomic productivity. This is a very important part as far as I'm concerned. It's also increase agronomic productivity from existing land, restoring degraded land, and converting some agricultural land back to nature, not the other way around. Not expanding the agricultural land, increasing the productivity of the existing land, which in sub-Saharan Africa can be 3 to 4, 5 times sometimes, double or easily. Save that land for nature conservancy. I would say rewilding the land. And I think that's a concept which we really need to restore lands so that we do not need to expand anymore. I want to share with you, after saying what I mean by land degradation and what we could do, I want to share with you the definition of the soil, which I've been talking about. It says, hello there, folks. Do you know who or what I am? I'm the geomembrane of the earth. I'm your protective filter, your buffer, your mediator of energy, water, and biogeochemical compounds. I'm your sustainer of productive life, your ultimate sources of elements, and the habitat for most biota. I'm the foundation that supports you, the cradle of your myths, and the dust from which you will return. I am a soil. Therefore, soil does matter tremendously. It is the answer to important global issues, whether it's a climate change, whether it's a food security, whether it's a water quality, whether it's an algal bloom, whether it's biodiversity. The answer lies in soil and restoring soil and restoring lands. Food production must be soil-centric. Why did Green Revolution bypass Africa? It was seed-centric. You got to have seed put in a soil that's fertile and productive for its potential to be realized. And of course, soil management is essential also to saving energy. Thank you.